The world went quiet. Streets became empty. Doors were locked. We were all told to stay inside our homes, to wait. The days were long, but the nights were longer. When the sun went down, the world felt different. It was a strange time, a lonely time. The silence was loud. Every small sound in the house became a big noise. A creak in the floor, a tap on the window. We were safe in our homes, or so we thought. But what happens when the place you call safe starts to feel scary? What happens when you are not as alone as you believe? Our first story is about a woman named Clara. She lived alone in a small apartment, suspended high above a city that had fallen silent. The once constant hum of traffic and life had been replaced by an unnerving quiet, amplifying her own solitude. From her window, her only portal to the outside world, she could see the windows of the monolithic apartment building across the street. Before the city went into lockdown, she never paid them much attention. They were just anonymous squares of light in the dark, fleeting glimpses of lives she would never know. But now, with the days and nights bleeding into one another, she found herself watching. She learned the rhythms of her unseen neighbors, the family who ate dinner at 7, the student who studied late into the night, the couple who always argued. Their quiet indoor lives became a strange, distant soap opera. Then one night, she noticed something new, something that broke the pattern. Across from her, in a part of the building that had always been a black void, a single window was illuminated. And in that window, an old woman stood there, perfectly still, looking out. Clara was certain she had never seen her before, not once. The woman wore a simple, almost timeless dress, the kind you might see in a faded photograph. Her hair was a shock of white, pulled back into a severe, neat bun. She didn't seem to be looking at anything in particular, just staring out at the empty, shadowed street below with an unnerving stillness. Clara watched, a strange mix of curiosity and dread coiling in her stomach. The woman didn't move a muscle. She was like a portrait, a haunting figure captured in a frame of light. Eventually, Clara forced herself away from the window and went to bed, but the stark image was burned onto the back of her eyelids. The next night, compelled by an impulse she didn't understand, Clara looked again. The woman was there, and the night after that. Every single night, the light was on, and the old woman stood motionless at her post. In her own mind, Clara began to call her the woman in the window. Her silent, nightly vigil became an anchor for Clara's own routine, a bizarre and unsettling ritual. First, she would look out the window. Then, she would see the woman, a constant, silent sentinel. A cold shiver would trace its way down her spine, a feeling that had nothing to do with the night air. And finally, she would try to sleep, her dreams filled with dark windows and silent figures. It was a deeply unsettling habit, but its predictability was a strange comfort in a world turned upside down. Clara almost got used to her phantom neighbor. But then, one night, something changed. Something that shattered the fragile routine and made Clara's blood run cold. The woman in the window, the silent statue, was about to do something Clara would never, ever be able to forget. That night, as Clara looked out her window, she saw the old woman as usual. Our second story is about Maya, a college student who, like so many others, found her world suddenly shrinking. When her campus closed, she traded her newfound independence for the familiar, suffocating walls of her childhood home. She spent her days confined to her old bedroom, a time capsule of teenage angst. Her entire university experience, her social life, her whole world, was now compressed into the glowing rectangle of her laptop screen. Her only real connection to the outside world was through a constant stream of video calls. The internet wasn't just a tool, it was her lifeline, a fragile digital thread keeping the loneliness at bay. One Tuesday night, deep into the second month of isolation, Maya was on a group call with her 3 best friends, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. Suddenly, her screen didn't just flicker, it convulsed. A wave of digital static washed over the image, accompanied by a sharp buzzing sound. Her friends' laughing faces froze, their expressions warped into grotesque pixelated masks. Before Maya could process it, a new window materialized on her screen. It didn't slide into view, it simply appeared, silently and instantly. In it was a girl, about Maya's age, with long dark hair obscuring her face. The video quality was poor, grainy. She sat hunched over in a pitch-black room, lit only by a cold blue light from her own monitor. And she was crying, not sobbing loudly, but weeping with a silent, unnerving steadiness, tears tracing paths down her pale cheeks. The rest of her screen remained frozen. Her friends were trapped in digital amber. The lively chat was gone, replaced by an unnerving silence. It was just Maya, her heart pounding, and this mysterious weeping stranger.
Hello? Can you hear me? Are you okay?
Maya asked, her voice trembling. She thought it had to be a prank, some edgy viral marketing, but the girl didn't respond. She just kept crying, her shoulders shaking with a grief that felt far too real. A glitch? A misdirected call? Annoyance mixed with fear. Maya tried to close the window, but the cursor was gone. She tried the trackpad. Nothing. She jabbed at the escape key, then frantically tried to quit the application. The computer was completely unresponsive. It was her machine, but she was no longer in control. Forced to watch, Maya saw the girl's face was a deathly pale, almost gray. Her eyes, wide and bloodshot, held a primal terror that chilled Maya to the bone. They were dark, bottomless pools of fear. But they weren't looking at Maya or at the camera. They were fixed on something just over her own shoulder, something in the darkness of her room. Then, a voice crackled through Maya's speakers. It wasn't the girl's. It was low, distorted, a guttural whisper that sounded like grinding metal. It spoke a single chilling word. Instantly, the girl's window vanished. The screen flickered, and her friends were moving again, laughing. For them, only a few seconds of a minor glitch had passed.
Whoa, Maya, you froze for a second there, one of them said, chuckling. Your face was priceless. Did your internet die?
Our final story is about a young woman named Chloe and the oppressive silence of being alone. When the world shut down, she found herself quarantining in her family's sprawling old house, a place filled with the weight of forgotten memories. Her parents were stranded in another city, their calls becoming tinny and distant. Chloe was left to navigate the echoing halls by herself, the sole occupant in a house built for a family that was no longer there. In the daylight, the house was a museum of her childhood, but at night it transformed. The familiar groans of the pipes and the settling of the foundation, sounds that had once been a comfort, now felt menacing. They were no longer just the house breathing, they felt like whispers on the edge of hearing. The silence between the sounds was worse, a heavy, expectant quiet that made her feel like an intruder in the house's nocturnal life. The true heart of her unease was the attic, a small square panel in the ceiling at the end of the upstairs hallway. It was a blind spot in the house's geography, a place she was never allowed to go. It's just full of dusty junk and spiders, her mother would say, a little too quickly. Her father would just change the subject. The warning felt less like a caution and more like a command, a strange, rigid rule that festered in her imagination. For weeks she pushed the attic from her mind, but then came the storm. Wind screamed and rattled the window frames, and through the chaos a new sound broke through, a low, rhythmic scraping. She dismissed it as a branch, but the sound was too regular, too deliberate. Scrape! A long, heavy drag. Then a pause. Scrape! It wasn't nature. It was the sound of something heavy being methodically pushed across the floorboards directly above her head. Sleep was impossible. Chloe retreated to the living room couch, pulling a blanket up to her chin as if it were a shield. She sat in the dark, a prisoner in her own home, listening. The scraping continued for hours, a torturous, intermittent rhythm that frayed her nerves. By the time the first gray light of dawn filtered through the windows, the sound had stopped. The silence it left behind was deafening. The fear of the unknown was now worse than any potential discovery. She had to see. She found an old stepladder and set it up beneath the hatch. Her heart hammered as she reached for the cold metal latch. It was stiff, but with a final push, it gave way with a sharp click. The hatch swung down, releasing a cascade of dust and the smell of stale, trapped air. A narrow, rickety ladder unfolded with it, disappearing into the blackness above. Taking a shaky breath, she switched on her phone's flashlight and began her ascent. Pulling herself up, she was met with a scene of perfect stillness. It was a graveyard of forgotten things. Boxes, furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts, all blanketed in a thick, uniform layer of gray dust. Her flashlight beam cut a path through the murky air as she swept it across the floor. The dust was a pristine, unbroken carpet. No footprints, no drag marks, nothing. A wave of relief washed over her, followed by a chilling confusion. The sounds had been so real. She was turning to leave when her light snagged on something in the far corner. Tucked away, almost hidden behind a stack of old suitcases, was a small wooden rocking chair. A child's chair. It was turned to face the wall, as if in punishment. A cold dread trickled down her spine as she crept closer. And then she saw it. In the thick carpet of dust, there was a perfect, clean semicircle of wood around the chair's rockers. The floorboards there were bare, worn smooth. The dust hadn't been disturbed. It had been methodically swept away. There were no footprints, only the undeniable evidence of constant, lonely motion. She finally understood. The scraping wasn't something being dragged. It was the sound of an empty chair, rocking itself back and forth all night long in the suffocating darkness above her head. Chloe slowly backed away, left the attic, and never looked back. The familiar had become forever frightening, and in the silence of quarantine, some doors are better left unopened. If you like these stories, subscribe for more true tales from the quiet. And remember, lock your doors.